Hey everyone! Today we're building an AI-powered chatbot using Amazon Lex and Bedrock. We're going to point it to our own data so we can ask questions about it. Let me show you the working version here. I'll just start with a hi. And then I've got some documents that are company travel policies, and I want to ask specific questions about those. Like, what are the visa requirements for Mars? And here we go. Here are the requirements. How about, should I get travel insurance? And it looks like it is recommended. Even though alien abductions are rare, it's a good idea. So hopefully that gives you an idea of what we're going to build. And this is an example of Retrieval Augmented Generation, or RAG for short, where you're combining the power of these pre-trained models and all of the intelligence of an AI service like Bedrock, but you're using it on your own data. So let's go build this thing. You'll need a few different things to follow along. First, an AWS account, obviously, and you want to be logged in as an IAM user with admin privileges. Make sure you're not logged in as your root account, as you'll actually be unable to do some things when we get to setting up our Bedrock knowledge base. And then you're going to need access to two different models, and I've mostly just put them here as reference. I'll walk you through how to get access to these if you don't have it already. But before we dive in, the all-important question, what will this cost me? We're going to be using several different services, starting with Bedrock, which gives us our generative AI capabilities. We'll be using two different models. First will be Anthropic, and you'll see the pricing here. We'll be using Claude 2. You can use some of these others as well if you'd like, but you'll see here the price for 1,000 input tokens, 1,000 output tokens, and a token's basically just a piece of a word, so pretty inexpensive, but just be aware of this if you plan to build it out further or leave it running for a long time. And then we're also going to be using Amazon Titan text embeddings, and you'll see the cost here. So very inexpensive, but just be aware these models do cost something. And then sitting behind Bedrock when we get to this point, we're going to be using the OpenSearch service for our vector database. More about that when we get there, but there is a price associated with this as well. We're going to be using serverless. And down here, you'll see the price, 24 cents per OCU, OpenSearch compute unit, per hour. Depending on how fast you get through this video, this might take an hour or two, so probably less than $1 total, but it's really important that you delete this one when we're done, and I'll walk you through how to do that. Otherwise, you can incur a cost of a few dollars per day. We're also going to be using Lex for the actual chatbot itself, and for Lex, you are able to try this out for free. From the date that you get started, it can process up to 10,000 text requests and 5,000 speech requests. So if this is the first time you're using Lex, it's probably going to be free for you, and then there's additional pricing down here if you need it. And then finally, for our inexpensive object storage, we're going to be storing our documents in S3, and you'll see the pricing here. For S3 standard, the first 50 terabytes, you're looking at 0.023 cents per gig. So in summary, this will probably cost you less than $1 US to follow along, but again, make sure you stick around to the end, and I'll walk you through how to delete everything. All right, now back to these two different models that we need access to. Let me show you how to request that. Out here in the AWS console, I'm going to come into Bedrock. And then over here on the left, I'll click on Base Models. Now there's a whole bunch of models here. We're just going to start at the top, though, with Claude version 2. Now if you have access to something and you hover over this copy, it will let you copy the model ID like you would expect. If you don't have access to something, though, and you hover over it, you'll get this little pop-up that your account doesn't have access. So anywhere you get this pop-up, just click on the link that it gives you, and that'll take you to a page where we can actually request what we need. All right, so here's all the things that I have access to here in the green. And you do have to request access. It's not just given automatically. I think Amazon wants to make sure that you're not accidentally using models you don't mean to, and potentially racking up a really large bill. So if you've never been in here before, you probably don't have access to anything. But what you're going to need is this one right here, the Titan Embeddings G1 text. And then you also need Claude right down here. Some of these other ones will work as well, but these are the two that I'm using. Now, since I've already been granted access, let me just choose something that I don't have access to, just to show you what that experience is. Let's say I wanted access to this one right here. If you just click on the Available to Request, the gray link here, then you can say Request Model Access. This will take you to another page, and just check what you want. So again, the ones you want are the Titan Embeddings G1 text, and then you want Claude. Now, depending on what you're requesting, sometimes it will automatically select other things for you, like Claude, for example, will usually also give you Claude 3 Haiku for text and vision. So select the ones that you need, and then scroll down, say Next, and then you'll submit your request. This can take a few seconds to a few minutes, but once you've been granted access, you should receive an email letting you know that you now have access. I've never personally been denied access. I suppose that could happen, especially for some of the larger, super expensive models, but for these that we're using here, I think they're pretty widely accessible. Alright, so you should have the access that you need now to the Bedrock models. Now let's talk about those travel policy documents that we have and what we need to do with those. These are going to live in an S3 bucket, and let me just briefly show you what I have. I've got 4 PDFs here. We've got travel policies, itinerary details, travel restrictions, and visa requirements. I'll just open one of these and show you what's in here. They're all really simple documents, and obviously not real world. You can create your own documents if you want, use actual company documents if you have them, but I will zip up these 4 docs and provide a link to them in the description if you want to use mine. But we want to take these documents and get them into an S3 bucket, so let's work on that part next. Back to the console, I'll navigate to S3 and create a new bucket. Give it a name. You can name yours whatever you want. And defaults for everything else, scroll down and create the bucket. Then view details to go to that bucket, and we'll upload our documents. So I'll just grab the 4 PDFs that I have here, drag those over, and upload. And that's basically all we need to do in S3. Okay, with that part out of the way, we know that we're eventually going to have a user that's interacting with a chatbot that we build with Amazon Lex. But we're not going to be able to just hook up that chatbot directly to S3. S3 is not really quote-unquote smart from an AI perspective. We can't ask S3 questions about the data in it. We can't ask it to summarize its data or anything like that. It's really just a document store. To get the AI capabilities, we need to use Amazon Bedrock. I do have a short video about the basics of Bedrock if you need those. The UI has changed a little bit since I published the video, but the concepts should still be the same, so I'll link it above and below if you're interested. But this is the piece we're going to work on now, is creating a knowledge base in Bedrock that points to our documents in S3. So back to the console, I already had Bedrock open here, so let me just back up. And over here on the left-hand navigation, come into Knowledge Bases. And we'll create a knowledge base. Now it'll give you a default name. Feel free to change that if you want, but I'm just going to leave mine as it is. For permissions, we'll have it create and use a new service role. This is what will allow Bedrock access to other services. I'll just leave that name the same as well. The data source, so where are we going to grab our data? That, of course, is going to be in S3, but it does work with other data sources as well, as you'll see here. Tags, I'll skip all of this and just say Next. And then here is where we actually point it to our S3 bucket. So I will browse S3. And then select the bucket that you created earlier. So mine was travel policies, and I'll choose. That looks good. And everything else we can leave the defaults. Next. And then we need to choose our embeddings model and our vector database. Now, if you have no idea what those are, let me just give you a brief explanation. If you do know, feel free to skip ahead through this part. Starting on the embeddings piece, say that you have 2 sentences. The cat is sleeping on the couch, and the dog is napping on the sofa. When you use embeddings, you basically convert those words, those sentences, into a list of numbers, and these are called vectors, and the numbers represent the meanings of those sentences. And you'll notice that the vectors, the numbers here, are very similar because the 2 sentences almost have the same meaning, even though cat and dog and couch and sofa are different words, the embedding captures the idea that these sentences are about an animal resting on furniture. So if we asked a question like, where is the pet resting? The embedding for the question might look something like this. And when we're trying to get an answer to that question, we'll compare the stored embeddings, realize that both sentences are very relevant, and retrieve them as answers. So that's a super simplified look at embeddings. And there are different models that do that kind of work in Bedrock. We're going to choose this one over here, which you should have requested access for earlier. So I'll select that, Embeddings G1 Text. And once you have your vectors, your numbers, you need to store them somewhere. And what better place to store them? In a database. And that's going to be your vector database, which is the next thing that we see down here, asking us where we want to store this stuff. The recommended way to do it is just with this quick create of a new vector store. This uses Amazon OpenSearch serverless vector store. But if you have a vector store somewhere else that's already created, you can choose that here. But let's go with the recommended way. Say next. Review everything. And then create the knowledge base. Now this might take a few minutes, so I'll pause the video and be back when it's done. Okay, we successfully created the knowledge base. Yay! And then up here in this message, it says that we need to sync our data sources, basically to make them searchable. So go to data sources. This will basically scroll you down the page to right here. Just select your data source and then say sync. That's pretty quick with just my 4 PDFs, but if you have a lot more data, this can take a while. All right, so we've got our Bedrock knowledge base set up. That hooks into the documents in the S3 bucket. And now the last piece, let's go build the actual chatbot using Amazon Lex. So in a new tab here, I'll navigate to Amazon Lex, and we'll create a bot. Now there is a generative AI version that will do some work for you, but I'm actually going to start in the traditional one, and we'll create a blank bot and see how to hook in the genAI pieces as we go. For bot name, I'm going to go with Mars Travel Bot. You can give it a description if you want. I'll just skip over that. And then let's create a new role with basic Lex permissions. Scrolling down. This will not be subject to the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, so we'll say no. For idle session timeout, we'll go with the default 5 minutes and then say next. Now we need to add our language for the bot. This obviously has support for multiple languages, so you would go through and do this. If you wanted 3 different languages, for example, you would set all of those up. We're just going to do the one, and I'm going to default to US English. For description, I'll just say a helpful assistant for company travel policies. And voice is also enabled for these bots, so you can choose the voice that you want. There are quite a few here. And if you choose a different voice, it will give you a sample of that, or you can also just hit play to hear what they sound like. I'm just going to go with the default though, Danielle for this one, and we'll say done. Now this will drop us into a new intent. An intent is basically an action that fulfills a user's request. So for example, let's change this one to the welcome intent, where the user first interacts or first launches the bot. And if we scroll down, we can enter the utterances, which are the phrases a user would speak or type to invoke this intent. So if I'm being welcomed, I would say something like hi, or hello, or howdy, or good morning, or something like that. So let's fill those in. If you scroll down here, you can add utterances. So I'll do hi, and then if you just hit the enter key, that will add it. We'll do hello, we'll do howdy, and you can add as many as you want. But that's what the user will say. And then the initial response from the bot, if we expand this down here, let's say, hi, how can I help you today? Or whatever message you want to put in there. And then for advanced options, you don't have to do all this. This can actually get very complex. But just for what we're doing, let's say that the next step in this conversation between the bot and the user should be that we want to wait for the user's input. Update options. So the user is going to say something like, hi. Our bot will say, hi, can I help you today? And then wait for the user to come back with some question. Okay, we'll save the intent. And now if we go back to our list of intents here, we've got the welcome intent, that's the one that we just created, and then every bot will have a fallback intent that gets created automatically. And this is basically what gets invoked when nothing else matches. So if I were to launch the bot and say goodbye, that wouldn't match the welcome intent, and so the fallback intent would be invoked in that case. But for now, just to keep things simple, let's build our bot and test out the intent that we have. So building will basically bundle up the bot's configuration, things like your intents, your utterances, and all of that, and it builds it into a machine learning model. And this is what enables the bot to understand and process our inputs. Okay, once it finishes building, then we can test it out. So let's just click on Test, and we'll say hi. So this was one of our utterances for the intent, and there we go. If we inspect, you'll see that we're in the welcome intent, as we would expect. But if we were to say something like, what are travel policies to Mars? Then we drop into that fallback intent, because we haven't handled those types of questions yet. Now you might be thinking that we're going to have to go build out a bunch of intents and utterances and design this whole conversation and back and forth, which you could do, but that would be pretty painful. So that's really where the AI capabilities come in with Bedrock. So let's just close out of this, and let's go add another intent that uses what's called the QnAIntent. So I'll just close out of this as well, and then say add intent, and we're going to use a built-in intent this time. Here are some of the others available out of the box. So a cancel intent, one for getting help, one for pausing, and so on. But the one for generative AI features is this top one right here, the Amazon QnAIntent. And this is going to go query our knowledge base and then let the user have a conversation about that. We don't have to go in and manually set up intents and utterances and all of that. So pretty cool feature. We'll select that and then give it a name. I'll just say QnA bot intent. You can't use the ampersand sign, so you'll have to use an N here if you want to use a name like mine. And then we'll say add. All right, now this intent is a little bit different than the first one we set up. Here we need to come down and select the model. So we're going to be using Anthropic, and then select the model that you requested access to. In my case, it was Claude v2, but if you use something else, make sure you select that. Go with v2. And then the knowledge store or knowledge base, we created this one earlier, but we need to get the ID for that. So I should still have that open in another tab here, my knowledge base. Just close out of our messages here. And scrolling up, here we go, my knowledge base ID. Just grab that, copy it to your clipboard, and then back here, paste that in. So we're saying, go look at that knowledge base to have a conversation with the user in this chatbot. Scrolling down, you could fill in additional utterances here, but we don't need them. Basically leave the defaults and then save intent. And then before we can test out the new changes, we do need to build again and to get this nice message here that we have changes that haven't been built. So let's build that, bundle in the latest things that we just did on that intent. Okay, looks good. And now let's test. So we'll start by kicking off our welcome intent. Howdy was one of the utterances I could use. Great. Now let's ask, what items can I expense? And it should be able to answer this question based on the documents that I have sitting in S3, which of course are getting pulled in through the knowledge base in Bedrock. Okay, oxygen tanks are reimbursable, but lava-proof boots are not. Bummer. Let's see, can I bring my pets? No, pets are not allowed. Now, if you ask something that it can't find the answer to, usually it's just going to drop you into the fallback intent. Let me just try something like, how much does it cost? Okay, so it actually answered that one. There are fees associated with the visa. What else could I ask? Is there coffee there? All right, so that knocked us into the fallback intent. So that's the default, kind of the catch-all. You could build out that intent to handle these types of scenarios, but just know that does happen when the AI can't find an answer to what you're asking. All right, awesome work. So you've got a Lex chatbot driven by Amazon Bedrock, and pulling your own documents out of S3. Now, obviously, the chatbot that you're using here is just for development purposes. There is a UI, a proper web UI that you can use. I will link this GitHub repo in the description for the video. I haven't personally tried this myself, but it is recommended by Amazon, so it'll just give you a simple interface here. You'll see an example of that. And there's instructions on how to actually get this started and get it working, so you might want to check that out if you want something beyond what we get in the console. Now, before I let you go, let's go through and delete all the resources that we spun up so you don't end up with any surprise bills. Starting with the Bedrock knowledge base, if you're already in the knowledge base, you can just delete it right up here with the delete button, or if you have backed out of it, just come into all of your knowledge bases, select it right here, and then say delete. Now, this is a very important message right here, that the underlying vector store itself is not deleted, and you will still be charged for that until you delete it, so we're going to go do that next. So let's start by deleting the knowledge base here. Say delete, and then I'll open up a new tab and we'll go to the OpenSearch service. And it might look like there's nothing here, but you actually need to be under serverless here on the left-hand side. So I'll just come into dashboard. And here you'll see that you do have stuff, and specifically this one collection. So make sure you delete this, otherwise you will be charged for it daily. Just select it and say delete. Okay, now let's go delete our S3 bucket. I still have that open here. Just close out of this, and I'm going to back up to all of my buckets. And then scrolling down to the travel policies, which is what I named mine, we'll just say delete. Now, you can't delete a bucket that has stuff in it, so first we'll need to empty the bucket. Type in permanently delete and say empty. And then using this link right up here, we can actually continue with that process of actually deleting the bucket. Enter the name of the bucket and delete. And then finally, deleting the Lex chatbot. So up here to Lex again. Let me just back up to Lex. We'll get to a list of all of our bots. Here on the left, here's my Mars travel bot. Just select it, and then up to action and delete. All right, that does it for this video, building out an AI-powered chatbot with AWS. If you like that, give me a thumbs up on the video so YouTube knows to share it with other people, and also think about subscribing for more content like this. Thank you so much for watching.